The classroom was quiet now. The bell had rung an hour ago, and the students had all filed out, their laughter and chatter fading down the empty hallways. Emma lingered at her desk, her fingers tracing the edges of the papers she had been grading, though her mind wandered far beyond the neat lines of handwriting before her. She loved teaching. Every day she felt a small thrill when a student grasped a new concept or shared a small triumph. But as the sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting golden streaks across the floor, Emma felt the familiar tug of loneliness. It wasn't a crushing loneliness, not exactly. More like a quiet echo, a soft emptiness that hummed in the background of her orderly life. She glanced around the empty classroom, inhaling the faint scent of chalk and paper. The world outside moved in hurried rhythms she no longer seemed to notice, caught up in schedules, obligations, and endless responsibilities. Yet here, in this moment, she felt a small spark of hope she rarely allowed herself to feel, a curiosity. A gentle wonder that perhaps, just perhaps, something unexpected could change her quiet routine. Emma had always been careful. Her heart careful. Her dreams careful. She had learned early that life moved in patterns and breaking them was a gamble. But sometimes, when the sun touched the floor just right, or the wind carried a soft note of autumn through the open windows, she allowed herself to imagine things she had never said out loud. A sound interrupted her thoughts, a hesitant tap at the door. Emma looked up, heart flickering with surprise. The classroom was supposed to be empty, Miss Carter. The voice was soft, polite, almost tentative. Emma's eyes met Daniel's, one of her students who had always been quiet, observant, and careful with his words. He stood by the door, his backpack slung loosely over one shoulder, his hands fiddling with the straps as though they could anchor him to the floor. "Daniel," she said gently, motioning for him to come in. "Is everything okay?" He nodded, but there was a hesitation in his posture that suggested otherwise. I wanted to talk to you," he admitted. "If that's okay." Emma gestured toward the empty desks. "Of course. Sit down." He moved slowly, deliberately, choosing a desk near the window. The sunlight caught his hair in a way that made the strands glow faintly, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself the quiet thought that he seemed older than his years, more thoughtful, more aware of the world than most students his age. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Outside, the leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. The distant hum of a lawnmower carried through the air, and the faint echo of footsteps from the hallway reminded them of the world beyond these walls. Inside, time seemed to slow. Finally, Daniel looked up, his eyes steady and honest. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, "about what I want to do and what matters to me. And I guess I wanted to tell someone who understands." Emma's heart swelled with an unspoken warmth. It was rare for a student to be this open, to reveal a piece of themselves without hesitation. She nodded slowly, leaning forward slightly. "I'm listening," she said softly, her voice carrying an ease that invited trust. Daniel swallowed, and for a moment he seemed unsure. Then he spoke, words careful but carrying weight. "You've always made things feel possible. Even when I didn't believe in myself, you made me feel like I could." A lump rose in Emma's throat. She was used to students thanking her, complimenting her lessons, but there was something different in his tone, something pure, vulnerable, and real. It wasn't flattery. It was recognition. I just wanted to tell you that," Daniel said, glancing down at his hands. "I don't know if anyone else has ever said this, but thank you for everything." Emma felt a quiet, tender ache in her chest. In the stillness of the empty classroom, she realized that these small, unspoken moments were what made her work meaningful. And yet, There was something more, a whisper of curiosity, a flutter of anticipation. She didn't know why, but she sensed that Daniel's words were only the beginning of something subtle, something that could gently shift the patterns of her quiet world. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves in a soft rustle, sunlight flickering across the desks. Inside, Emma and Daniel shared a silent understanding, a moment suspended in time. It was fragile, fleeting, yet charged with a quiet magic that neither of them could name. Emma smiled softly, reaching for her pen. "I'm glad you told me," she said. "Sometimes saying what's in your heart, that's the bravest thing you can do." Daniel nodded, a small, shy smile tugging at his lips. The clock ticked quietly, and the empty classroom seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for what might come next. In that gentle silence, Emma allowed herself a thought she rarely entertained. Maybe, just maybe, life had a way of surprising even the most careful hearts. And maybe she would see exactly how, in the days to come. As the classroom emptied, and the sunlight softened through the tall windows, Emma found her thoughts drifting not to the present, but to memories that had quietly shaped her heart. The moments she often tucked away in the corners of her mind, small yet luminous, like hidden stars in a vast sky. She remembered the first time she had met Daniel. It wasn't a dramatic entrance or a sudden revelation. It was the way he had lingered after class one rainy afternoon, the tip of his notebook peeking from his bag as he asked the simplest question about a poem they had read. His curiosity was quiet, almost shy, but there was something earnest in his eyes that had caught her attention. Emma had smiled at him then, a gentle encouragement, and something unspoken had passed between them. A small recognition, like two pieces of a puzzle finding a fleeting fit. She recalled how he had returned the next day, and the day after that, always asking questions, always listening, always trying to understand not just the lesson, but the world itself. It had been months since that first day, and yet she could still see the way his gaze lingered on the classroom window when the sunlight hit the floor just right. There had been no words for it then, no declarations, only the quiet rhythm of shared curiosity and mutual respect. Those little moments, Daniel's careful hand raising in the back row, his hesitant smile when praised, the way he would sometimes pause mid-sentence to think, had left gentle echoes in her heart. Emma's mind drifted further back, to her own past. She remembered her first years as a teacher, walking into classrooms filled with restless energy, and wondering if she could ever make a difference. She had been patient, but there were nights when she questioned herself, nights when the weight of expectation pressed down like the humid summer air outside the school windows. And yet, there were always small, quiet victories, a note left on a desk, a whispered "thank you," a student who finally understood a lesson that reminded her why she had chosen this path. And Daniel had become one of those victories, though in a way far more profound than she could have imagined. Their connection had begun not with grandeur, but with gentle conversations after class, fleeting exchanges in the hallways, shared smiles over books and homework, and the occasional unspoken understanding that passed between them. No one else might notice these small signs, but she did. She always had. The passage of time, as it so often does, had brought distance too. Daniel had grown taller, his voice steadier, his presence more confident. Life had nudged them along separate paths, and yet these quiet, subtle moments remained frozen in memory, alive with nostalgia and tender longing. She remembered a rainy afternoon when he had forgotten his umbrella, and she had offered him hers. They had walked together, sharing stories and laughter, not noticing the drizzle that soaked the world around them. That brief walk had felt like a lifetime compressed into a single beautiful memory. Emma's chest tightened slightly as she thought of all the things that had gone unsaid, the encouragement she had wanted to offer, but had held back, the questions she had wanted to ask about his dreams, but had left unspoken. Timing, she realized, had always been delicate, like the balance of sunlight on the classroom floor at dusk. Too early, and words fell flat. Too late, and they risked missing the moment entirely. And yet, now, as Daniel had lingered after class that afternoon, a new chapter seemed to be opening. The echoes of the past, the shared smiles, the careful conversations, the small acts of trust had created a foundation. It was quiet, subtle, and full of promise. Emma could feel it in her chest, a gentle stirring, a soft warmth that hinted at something that might grow, nurtured by patience, understanding, and the quiet beauty of human connection. Outside, the leaves rustled gently in the afternoon breeze, golden light reflecting on the walls of the classroom. Emma glanced down at the papers on her desk, the familiar comfort of their ordered lines grounding her, yet she could no longer ignore the tender pull in her heart. Memories had a way of lingering, shaping the present in ways both subtle and profound. She thought of Daniel's small gestures, the way he had once stayed behind to ask a question about a poem, the way his laughter sometimes carried a hint of wonder, the way his eyes reflected thoughtfulness beyond his years. And she understood in a quiet, almost secret way, that these echoes of the past had guided her to this moment. Emma sighed softly, her gaze drifting toward the hallway where Daniel had vanished moments ago. Life, she realized, had a gentle rhythm. It whispered, nudged, and sometimes surprised. And now, after all these quiet, luminous echoes of the past, she felt the first flicker of anticipation. Perhaps, she thought, this was the beginning of something new, not sudden, not dramatic, but real, tender, and meaningful. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to wonder, how far could these quiet connections reach? The afternoon sun dimmed slowly, casting long shadows across the classroom floor. Emma remained seated, letting the memories wash over her, letting the echoes of past moments guide her thoughts. Somewhere in the quiet, she knew that life's soft surprises often arrived when least expected, and that sometimes, waiting and listening was the bravest thing of all. The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the classroom windows, turning the dust motes into tiny golden specks that floated lazily in the warm light. Emma sat at her desk, grading papers with a gentle focus, when she noticed a shadow at the doorway. "Miss Carter?" A familiar voice, calm but hesitant, pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up and her heart skipped not from surprise, but from recognition. Daniel. It had been months since she'd last seen him linger after class. And in that time, he had grown taller, steadier, but still carrying the same quiet thoughtfulness that had first drawn her attention. He held a folder in his hand, shifting slightly, as if unsure where to stand. "Daniel," she said softly, pushing her chair back just a little. "It's nice to see you again." He offered a small, polite smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "I just wanted to ask your advice on something. I thought you might know the right way to look at it." Emma gestured to the empty seat across from her. "Of course. Sit down." As he settled, the classroom felt warmer, the space between them carrying the quiet weight of shared history. Memories flickered in her mind. The rainy afternoons, the whispered questions, the subtle smiles that had passed between them without words. It was strange and comforting, how those echoes of the past seemed to have waited here, tucked into the air, until now. Daniel opened the folder, and Emma could see the neat pages of notes and plans, evidence of careful thought and effort. But what caught her attention more than the papers was the sincerity in his eyes. The way he seemed both tentative and eager, like someone on the edge of a personal discovery. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do," he said quietly. almost as if testing the words on her before they could escape. And I remembered how much you encouraged me, how you always made me feel like I could actually do something important. I wanted to hear your opinion. Emma felt warmth bloom in her chest. She remembered those moments, tapped quietly in the past, when she had simply listened and encouraged, never realizing the quiet weight her words carried. I'm glad you asked, she said gently. Sometimes talking it through helps more than we think. They spoke for a while, softly, calmly, without rush. Their conversation wandered through goals, ideas, and reflections on small successes and challenges. Emma noticed the way Daniel's expression softened whenever he spoke about something that mattered deeply to him, and she realized how much of the past had quietly shaped both of them. At one point, Daniel paused, looking out the window at the fading light. Do you remember that time, a few months ago, when I stayed after class just to ask about the poem we read? He asked. I never really thanked you properly for that day. It meant a lot to me. Emma smiled, a gentle, reflective smile. I remember, she said. You were thoughtful even then. I could see you wanted to understand, not just the words, but the meaning behind them. That's something rare. A small silence fell, comfortable and full of unspoken understanding. In that quiet, Emma felt a subtle shift, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but significant in its own way. The past and the present were blending, layering moments of trust, care, and human connection into something quietly profound. Daniel glanced back at her, eyes steady. It's strange, he admitted. Sometimes I wonder how people cross our paths at the right time, even when we don't notice it. Like fate, or just coincidence. But I'm glad it happened. Emma's heart stirred gently. There was nothing romantic, nothing urgent or suggestive, only the deep human warmth of recognition and connection. I'm glad too, she said softly. Life has a way of bringing people back when they need each other the most, even in small, unexpected ways. The clock ticked on, and shadows lengthened across the classroom floor. They continued to talk, sharing stories, memories, and plans for the days ahead. Every glance, every pause, every thoughtful word carried the quiet intimacy of human understanding, the kind that didn't need drama or intensity to leave its mark. Finally, Daniel stood, holding the folder carefully. Thank you, he said, with that same sincerity that had always defined him. For listening and for everything you've taught me. Emma smiled, feeling a lingering warmth that would stay with her long after he left. You've already done a lot for yourself, she said. I just helped you see it. As he walked out of the classroom, the sunlight catching the edges of his hair, Emma remained seated, letting the echoes of their conversation settle. The past had returned gently, like a familiar melody, and the present had allowed them to hear it again. She realized, with a quiet, tender awareness, that human connections, those small, meaningful ties, often returned in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, the most important moments weren't the dramatic ones, but the gentle, fleeting encounters that quietly rekindled hope, understanding, and the simple beauty of being seen. The next morning, Emma arrived at the classroom earlier than usual, the hallways still quiet, and the air crisp with early autumn. She had a sense of gentle, persistent feeling that today would hold a moment worth remembering. She arranged the papers on her desk and adjusted a few chairs, the routine movements grounding her thoughts. Yet, underneath it all, a quiet anticipation hummed in her chest. Memories of the past and the conversation from yesterday lingered, carrying warmth and reflection. A soft knock on the door broke her reverie. Emma looked up to see Daniel standing there, his folder clutched lightly under one arm, his expression calm but thoughtful. Good morning, Miss Carter, he said, his voice steady yet gentle. Do you have a moment? Emma gestured toward the empty desk near the window. Of course. Come in. Daniel moved closer, settling into the chair with a careful grace. The sunlight highlighted the familiar contours of his face. The same eyes that had once looked at the world with tentative curiosity, now steady and assured. Emma noticed a subtle vulnerability beneath his composed demeanor, a quiet honesty that had always drawn her attention. I've been thinking a lot since we spoke yesterday, Daniel began. About my future and about everything you've done to help me see what I'm capable of. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had guided him, encouraged him, but hearing him acknowledge it aloud carried a depth that touched her heart. I realized something, Daniel continued, his hands folding lightly over the folder. I've been afraid to trust myself sometimes, to believe that I could actually make choices that matter. But talking to you reminded me that I can. That I've always had the ability to do more than I thought possible. Emma's eyes softened. She remembered the quiet afternoons, the thoughtful conversations, the moments when he had hesitated but chosen to share a piece of himself. You always had it in you, she said softly. I just helped you notice it. Daniel's gaze met hers, steady and sincere. I wanted to say thank you, he said, his voice calm but full of feeling. For listening, for believing in me, and for being someone I could trust. You've made a difference in my life in ways I can't fully explain. Emma's throat felt tight with emotion. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't about love in the usual sense. But it was something profoundly human. Recognition, respect, gratitude, and connection. She nodded, letting the depth of the moment sink in. Daniel, it's been a privilege to watch you grow, she said. Sometimes, the hardest part is simply believing in yourself. You've done that, and I couldn't be prouder. He smiled, a quiet, reflective smile, the kind that spoke of understanding and peace. I wanted you to know, he said, because some things like guidance, encouragement, and trust deserve to be acknowledged. Even if it's just a small gesture. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep, gentle gratitude. Life had a way of reminding people what mattered most in the quietest, most unassuming ways. And this moment, so simple, so unadorned, was one she would carry with her always. They sat in silence, letting the classroom hold them in its warm, sunlit calm. Outside, the wind moved the leaves on the trees, the gentle rustle a soft accompaniment to their shared stillness. Emma realized that these moments, the acknowledgement of effort, the gentle truths spoken aloud, the respect and trust between people were what gave life its quiet richness. Finally, Daniel stood, placing the folder carefully on the desk. I should go, he said, though his smile held a subtle lingering warmth. But I'll take your advice to heart. And I hope, maybe someday, I can pay it forward. Help someone else see what they're capable of. Emma nodded, her own smile reflective and calm. I'm sure you will, she said softly. That's the beauty of the journey, passing on what you've learned, inspiring others without even realizing it. As he left the classroom, the sunlight shifted, casting gentle shadows across the floor. Emma stayed seated for a moment, letting the quiet linger, the echoes of gratitude and understanding filling the space around her. She felt a sense of completion, a peaceful knowing that life's true treasures often came in moments like this, simple, sincere, and deeply human. Emma reflected on everything that had brought them to this point. Patience, small acts of trust, shared memories, and the courage to speak the truth. She understood that meaningful connections weren't always loud or dramatic. They were gentle, steady, and enduring, leaving traces on the heart that lasted far beyond the moment. With a quiet sigh, Emma gathered her papers and glanced at the empty hallway. Life would continue its course, full of routines and small surprises. But this moment, this day, reminded her of the beauty of connection, the power of honesty, and the lasting impact of caring for someone with patience and understanding. And for the first time that morning, she smiled fully, knowing that hearts could grow, trust could flourish, and people could leave lasting impressions on one another, without urgency, without drama, just quietly, profoundly, and respectfully.